Welcome to Watches in the Wild. Today we are going to travel to Fribourg in the French part of Switzerland. A friend there will allow me to take a look at what has to be the most unique, the most underrated and the most sexy modern day Rolex. And I'm not just saying that because I want to get your attention. While we ride the train to Fribourg, let's touch upon the history of the model we are going to see. It reaches surprisingly far back. The first Cellini prints was made in 1928, or a quarter of a decade before the introduction of the Rolex Submariner. Its second subdial below the hours and minutes was relatively large for the day. That's why it was also called the doctor's watch. Doctors were more easily able to read the precise time and check with it the heart rate of a patient, for example. Staying true to that heritage, the modern-day Cellini still uses small rather than center seconds. Another feature that carried over to the new model is its rectangular shape and movement. As with many of their older watches, Rolex didn't manufacture the movement themselves, but relied on a company named Egler to supply it for them. Egler initially specialized in women's pocket watches and later was bought by and became a part of Rolex. As you will have no trouble seeing, the movement is a beauty. What's remarkable, besides its aesthetic appeal, is the large mainspring barrel, which provided an impressive power reserve of over 2 days. We have arrived in Fribourg and I'm more than eager to take a look at the modern reincarnation of the prince now. So without any further delay, let's open the curtain, or rather that famous green Rolex box, and take a look. I don't know about you, but I'm immediately struck by its sensual and downright sexy appearance. Before this video I was convinced that I'm no fan of gold, certainly not rose gold. But this thing is so intoxicatingly beautiful that I find myself almost drunk. My hand is shaking, my heart is racing. I've no choice but to capitulate and yield to its luster. As I'm trying to regain my wits, let me mention some of the Art Deco styling elements of this prince. Rather than boiling everything down to its bare essentials, like the Bauhaus style would insist on, Art Deco emphasizes and celebrates the superfluous styling elements, which, according to this design philosophy, are actually the most necessary ones. The elegance of its shape, the use of precious materials, as well as the sensual appeal of the overall aesthetic are all inspired by this style. In this indoor shot, also note the two fluted bands flanking the dial, which add some not needed but much appreciated sparkle and give the dial a more three-dimensional appearance. What is also very Art Deco about this watch are the black and grey gadroons radiating out from the center of the second subdial. The sun-like pattern only manifests itself in certain angles, but when it does, it explodes onto the dial and imparts it with even more splendor. Oh, and let me fawn over the stepped-out case flank, its sexy sensual curves which flow in perfect parallel to the rounded sapphire glass. Especially in the sun, it looks so organic and ablaze with fire. If this watch was a woman, I'd rush to climb up her balcony or parachute out of an airplane to get a chance to meet her, and I'm barely even kidding. The prince being a dress watch, I wish it was a tad bit smaller, but thankfully its 44mm lug width comes nowhere near to testing the limits of my wrist. Its height of 11.5mm is likewise pretty manageable, easily sliding under any cuff, but I doubt you would want to hide it there. While we are taking a look at Fribourg from above, let's highlight again how special this watch is in the Rolex universe. Many of its core characteristics are not only atypical of Rolex, but seem to be a negation of what Rolex is all about. There are simply no other modern Rolex watches with a rectangular case shape. There are no other references with a hand-wound movement. Yes, the prince features a hand-wound movement, and there are certainly no other Rolexes with a display case back proudly showing that movement off. And here it is, the only serially produced Rolex movement meant to be seen by its owner. Note the sunray-like finish of the bridges, which echo the gadroon pattern we saw on the dial. Though harkening back to the movements of old, it features a modern free-sprung and full balance architecture and a solid power reserve of 70 hours. Oh, and the winding feel is buttery smooth. Really, the only gripe I have with this watch is how reflective it is in direct sunlight, with those reflections distracting and somewhat taking away from the beauty of the dial. I know that all modern Rolexes lack effective AR coating, but clearly Rolex doesn't want to be Rolex with this watch, so why not make an exception here? I would be remiss not to mention the three other variants of the Cellini Prince line, which started production in 2005 and was discontinued in 2015, likely because people just didn't expect these kinds of watches from Rolex. Now, while I like the other variants, I have to say that this rose gold version is my clear favorite of the four. If, for example, we look at the design of the hour and minutes and the small second style, they seem disjointed in the other models and are much more integrated and harmonious in this rose gold version, with the 6 featuring in and neatly connecting both time displays. To conclude, here it is next to my Tudor Pelagos, a puristic tool watch with a completely different design philosophy. With its brute, bold and almost menacing appearance, it is the complete opposite of the Prince, and for that reason complements it quite well. At least it's what I'm telling myself. Wouldn't they make a perfect two-watch collection? As I leave you with another bird's eye view of Fribourg, let me thank my friend who kindly entrusted me with his watch. And let me keep dreaming about that Rolex, which isn't a Rolex, and maybe precisely for that reason, the most attractive Rolex there is.